Hello there.
How are you today?
I'm doing well, thanks. How about yourself?
I'm very good. My name is Michael. I'll be doing the podcast. So I'm very happy to speak to you. I mean, I've been reading your book, and I must
Ah,
say it's one of the nicest things I've read in a very long time.
hey, thank you very much, Michael. Appreciate that.
It reads a little bit like a Disney movie, to be honest.
Well, it's funny you should say that. We got a producer at Disney Plus who's very interested, a guy named Eddie Rubin, and I'm working with a guy named Jim Bernstein who did Mighty Ducks 3, one of the Disney products. I'm finishing the script and we're almost done. Now, of course, about 15 hoops between there and the silver screen, but so far so good.
And
So,
look, I'm old enough to remember the Miracle on Ice.
haha, you and me
The
both.
USA beat the former Soviet Union,
That's
and
right.
it has that feel to it.
That's very good to hear. You'll see Herb Brooks quoted in there a few times, actually.
Yeah, I
Um,
really enjoyed it. I thought it was such a good leadership book. I mean, I don't know how long you worked on it, but judging by the dates, it seems like you wrote it over a couple of years and you
that's
were
about right.
referencing notes. So I liked the style of writing, to be honest. I thought it was very accessible. I don't know ice hockey very well, but it's written in a way where you don't have to know the sport.
Good. That's vital. That was one of the things we're trying to shoot for is you don't have to know a thing about sports or hockey in particular to understand this book. So that's reassuring, Michael. Thank you.
It's also interesting because it made me want to learn about ice hockey, to be honest. I was reading the book. I got to learn about ice hockey. I got to figure this sport out because, I mean, obviously, I know baseball, I know basketball, I know a little bit about the NFL because it's a bit of a complicated game. But ice hockey is a game I've just never followed. I don't know the rules, but I'm thinking, okay, I got to learn about ice hockey. I got to figure this sport out. I got to watch the Raiders play or something like that.
Are you a soccer fan at all? Football?
I'm a big soccer fan, yes.
Well, the strategy is about the same. You're always trying to do give and goes, trying to, three guys basically cycling around versus two guys is what you're hoping to get. So in that sense, it's very similar. The boards change things a little bit, but the basic strategy you'll find is about the same. I urge you though to see it in person and not on TV. On TV, it's very hard to track. It's gotten easier with better TV, but it's so much better live.
Yeah, I think I'm
So
going to go to Vegas and I'm going to
perfect.
watch them play because they have a very nice arena. It's new as well. I think everything's going to work. The thing that I found very interesting about the way you approach this is that you didn't judge these guys for being teenagers who are losers
Huh.
and just want to have a good time. I noticed that in the way you write and the way you think, there was no judgment there. Because a lot of people, when they come in and they want to deal with teenagers, it's always this narrative that teenagers are lazy, they just want to have fun, break things, and they're a lost cause.
That's usually that's what I heard about those guys, in fact.
Yeah.
And yeah, when I give the speeches on this, corporate America, it's the same thing with the current generation, Gen Z and so on. They're entitled, they're self-involved, they don't want to work hard, they quit easily. And I've seen that. I know what they're talking about. But my view on that is then we're coaching them wrong. So,
Well, I
uh,
want to dig into this a little bit because I think it's an important thing here. Firstly, how did you have that mindset? And how did you keep that mindset? Because clearly, when you first started working with them, they weren't becoming better overnight. They were still
right.
teenagers who were actually pleased at the fact they were losing and making T-shirts about being 0 for 22. I thought that was quite hilarious. And they'd actually turned themselves into a little bit of outcasts by going to a school dance and being proud of their failures. And I'm thinking a lot of parents are probably telling their children, don't hang out with these guys. They're celebrating failure. So for me, I want to get into the psychology. How did you approach things this way? And how did you keep that mindset?
Well, a few things. One, I wasn't that great a player myself. And I knew that to turn anything around, the third and fourth line players count for a great deal. So don't judge them yet. Second of all, my whole belief was they were better than the record. So
Yeah.
I wanted to prove that. So I believed that before they did. Um, on top of that, chapter 3, as you know, is titled Be Patient with
Yes.
Results, but Not Behaviors.
I like
So
that.
I knew the results, especially for a team that had not won a game in a year and a half. Look, when you have 5 wins, Michael, you're 1 win away from 6 wins. When
Yeah.
you got 0 wins, you don't know how far below 0 you really are.
Yes, I like
So
that.
we could improve greatly and not win a game that year. That was possible. I knew that was possible. So let's stay off that one. Let's get to behaviors. And behaviors vary. Some took longer than others, but by the end of the summer, their behaviors were pretty much what I wanted. And at that point, I knew we were going to be a better team. So my advice to leaders and whatnot is instead of being, cussing out the current generation and stereotyping them and so on. Look, if you're doing that, you're going to get what you expect, frankly. If you have higher estimations for them, higher expectations, you're going to get those too. And look, the Navy SEALs, no matter what the economy is like,
Yes.
they pay $54,000 a year, and they take 6% of those who apply. And the Peace Corps pay you a few $100 to dig ditches in the world's poorest places, and they take 1 out of 6. So apparently, you can't just cite salary and so on as why you can't recruit people. You got to sell the mission more than the salary. And that's what we did. So our mission was to be the hardest working high school hockey team in the state of Michigan, and in a few years win a state title, which they thought I was crazy, but we actually came surprisingly close at the end of our second year. So with the same players, by the way.
Yeah.
So my advice on that one is, man, you have no idea the potential of the people you're talking to. I didn't think we'd get it turned around that fast. I thought it was going to take 3 to 5 years. It took them 2 years. So that's how ambitious they were. So never underestimate your people, and never tell them what they can't do. You don't know what they're capable of doing.
Yeah, one statistic in the book, which you bring up a few times, I thought was quite striking, because you weren't turning around a team, you were turning around the people. Because you can turn around a team by replacing team members. And I've seen that often in sports. Right? It's very common. Trade players, sell players, bring in some 19-year-old superstar from Nigeria and so on. But you kept the same team.
I did, and I think that's teachers, by the way, have to do this every year. So it's nothing extraordinary in my account.
Yeah.
My mom was a teacher, so was my grandmother, etc., all through the ages. They get the class they get. They don't get to pick. And whenever I hear a teacher say, "Oh, it's a horrible class," man, I've never ever heard a great teacher say that, ever.
Yeah.
So you don't start there. We did have more good players who came out for the team after our first year, because they had heard it's a good place to play. Which is another point there, Michael, and that is that your employees will recruit your employees. You can send the brochures all you want, and the conferences and the job fairs and whatnot, but before you get hired, chances are you're going to talk to somebody who already works there. That's why you heard about the place in the first place. So our players told 3 or 4 of the hotshots in the school who had not been playing for us that this is a good place to play. And those guys, God bless them, they didn't all come out, but some of them did.
Yeah.
But I kept all the other players. So some of the guys who were freshmen for the 0, 22, and 3 team ended up being one of the best teams in the country 4 years later, same guys. And I have a much greater respect for those in leadership who work with what they have instead of clearing house and bringing in their own people. And when you do that, and I know you need some loyalty and so on, but when you do that, you risk being surrounded by yes men and yes women who will get you in trouble very fast. And if you don't believe me, ask Vladimir Putin, whose cabinet obviously told him, invading Ukraine, great idea, going to be easy. Not so much.
It's interesting. You talk about the Navy SEALs. I've actually lived in San Diego, and I have quite a few friends who are Navy SEALs.
Wow.
And I lived in Vegas, and I had a lot of friends who worked in the Air Force drone unit, whatever it's called. Yeah. And I was actually in Coronado Island just a few days ago. Yeah. And the thing that strikes me about these guys is they are so polite. You think a guy who goes out and, I'm sure they do some pretty scary things, but they're so polite and they're so mission focused. Mm-hmm. They really believe in what they're doing. These are not people that you need to convince.
They're not. In fact, the problem they have, God bless them, is the opposite. And that is too many qualified people trying out. Think about the stat I threw out there already, that only 6% are the ones who make it, the Navy SEALs. Well, the other 1,000 they're cutting, look, they're not you and me. These guys are already pretty well world-class, crazy, in shape, intense guys. So the ones who make it, Al Clark, my mentor, gave me a great line. If they know that they had to do something that not everybody would be willing to do just to make the team, and with a little encouragement, they will enforce the team culture themselves. And that's exactly what happens with Navy SEALs. They have leaders, and I'm sure the leaders are very good. But the whole point of a Navy SEAL is when you're on the ground, you have to trust those guys to do the right things. And those guys believe in that mission. If you don't believe in the mission, I bet the guys themselves will gas you out, not the leadership. So you want that. Peace Corps got the same thing going. And that's what I wanted on my team. That's what I want in my class at Michigan also. And the best corporations get that going as well.
So now with the Navy SEALs, it's fairly obvious. It has a reputation, a culture. It's world famous, right? If you tell someone you're a Navy SEAL, and these guys never tell people they're a Navy SEAL, they keep it really quiet when you meet them. So you understand the mission. But for the Riverettes, the team you were coaching, they never had a culture of success. So how do you
No, we had the
inculcate a
opposite.
mission?
Yeah, we had won 10 wins out of 25 games. We hadn't done that in a decade, more than a decade, I think. And they were used to losing, as you pointed out early on, when I thought we were just chatting, but hey, it's the show. I like your approach, by the way. These guys had t-shirts made up 0 and 20, ended up being 0, 22, and 3. They were chanting at the school dance, 0 and 16. Yes. That was the record at the time. They're in the middle of the school dance chanting this, and the other students were mystified, of course. So it had become a point of pride. And the hardest thing, one of the great things, fun things about this book for me, was that my players are now in their 30s. They were my age. They're my age now that I was when I was coaching them. So they've got wives and kids now. They give me parenting advice, by the way, Michael, and I've got to take it. I'm a late starter. Yeah, exactly. But they've been out there. Most of them are in leadership roles now. So they know what works and know what didn't work, how it doesn't work. And Mike Henry, our captain, our first captain, he said, you know what? We actually wanted desperately to turn it around. We didn't tell you that. We were willing to work for it. We expected to work for it. But the hardest thing, he said, was getting us to care. And by that is hanging your neck out and admitting to people that you actually mean business and you're trying, because it's scary to try and fail. If you're being ironic about it and being silly and want to chant 0 and 16 at the school dance, all right, then losing, carries very little pain. It's kind of like me and my old procrastinating ways in high school and college. If you pull an all-nighter and you get a B+, you're a genius. All right, great, good for you. If I work 2 weeks on the paper and I still get a B+, that's painful. And that's what I was asking them to do. All right, to hang it out there, put their necks on the line before the game started, to actually care, to be public about caring. And Mike said that was exactly it. We were too cool to care. And when you're trying to turn on a culture, that's the first and hardest place you have to go. So it was a cultural shift we needed, not just hard work and discipline and team spirit and so on, but caring. The good news is these guys were unified from the year before from all the losses, and actually a great senior class they had the year before I got there with Brian Skyless and some others, Brandon Tucker and so on. But every other problem we had to address, and the biggest one is you actually have to care. You have to care.
Yeah, the thing that struck me about the story, you mentioned you work for one of your players. And what I found interesting is because I do know many guys who talk proudly about their high school athletics, and they were on the football team and they won many things. But I know for a lot of people, their greatest moment came in high school. When I was reading the book, it sounds as if you taught these young men, I'm guessing they're all men, I can't remember if it's girls as well. Yeah. And you taught them the principles of how to be successful, and they carried that throughout their lives as opposed to peaking in high school. And I found that interesting because a lot of people peak in high school. I mean, I was at a bar the other day and this guy was telling me about how he's showing me his class ring, and it's very clear he peaked in high school. Nothing good came out of his life. So I found it interesting that you taught them these principles and you gave them confidence, and they went on to become good people that had greater success later. That's a very interesting observation.
I've done a number of interviews for this book, of course, but Michael, might be my favorite question so far. That even touches me, for crying out loud. The whole idea was not to, I say in the book, if you asked me when I took the job, what would success look like? Yes, I expected to win more games, beat the rivals, be ranked, all this other good stuff, and compete for a state title. But that's not at all, those were all byproducts, I thought. Yes. What I wanted was this strong culture where you knew in that locker room that everybody had your back. Everybody was working hard. Everyone was exceeding their limits individually and as a team. And that confidence you carry with you throughout your life. And these guys said that in the book repeatedly, which gratified me. In part, I think, because we focused on, and we said in the book, we said at the time, that our values will outlive our victories. And I never judged them about winning or losing a game. It's always about the values we brought to the table. And that's why we said, again, we're focusing on behaviors, not results. I care about results. We'll post the results and all the stats and everything else. But I want the behaviors. The behaviors you pick every day. And for us, it's just two very simple things. Work hard, support your teammates. That's it. If you do those two things, I'm happy. Even when we get crushed 13-2 by the state's best team. Yes. This is hockey, by the way, not football, I'll remind you. Yeah. Those are increments of one there, Michael. And then even when we win, 6-0 versus a bad team, if we didn't work hard and support our teammates, you're not going to like Monday. I'm going to fix it. So if you take the approach that we're a values-driven organization, then by definition, those values should be with you and stronger when you leave this place than when you enter this place. And that was the real goal. And we did say in the interview and elsewhere, our one goal was to raise fine young men and women, basically. And that was it. So that's what we focused on. And I'm very pleased to report that these guys have done that and more. And the list of leaders I've got in the back of the book are really quite incredible. So I just saw one of them yesterday, Alan Sheldon, whose kid is my kid's age. He runs dorm dining for the University of Michigan, which is not a small job, of course, with about 10,000 freshmen or so, somewhere in there. So these guys do great things, and it's been so much fun to watch what they can do now.
I remember, I'm a big rugby fan, huge rugby fan.
I've covered it. That's tough.
That is tough. And actually, I was speaking to my trainer. I told him I'm going to start playing rugby. He said, don't do it. If you tear something, it's never going to recover fully. But anyway, I was speaking to a former All Black player, New Zealand's
I know about those
championship
guys,
rugby team.
Pregame ritual, yes.
And I'm not going to mention his name because it's a personal conversation, but he could have gone on to play at any club in the world for a multi-million-dollar package. And I remember I asked him, why didn't you do it? Because he drives this really beat up car. His wife has to stay at home, watch the kids. He lives a simple life. And he's one of the top All Black players in the world at the time. He's still, revered. And I asked him, why didn't you go to play in the UK? And he said, I'd stop being an All Black.
Wow. It
says everything, right?
That's the Navy SEALs in a nutshell, basically. Tell me a Navy SEAL can't make more money doing something else, or a Peace Corps volunteer. Yeah. And the All Blacks, by the way, if you don't know about them, look them up, folks. They're amazing. And I don't know a lot about rugby. I've covered it. I've written some stories about it. They're it's football without the pads, basically. It's pretty rough. But that says everything. And it also speaks to the culture they've created with the All Blacks down in New Zealand, of course, and what that means to them. So there's a great example of Al Clark being right, that these guys have created a culture that now reinforces itself.
Yes.
And what a wonderful thing. I mean, it's save $1 million by keeping one of the best rugby players in the world. That speaks volumes. And I will say on our team, we had 4 or 5, by the third year, we had 4 or 5 hotshot players. And if they had chosen, they could have played AAA travel team somewhere, and they all could have done it. And they all chose to stay with us because at that point it just felt better to them. And most of them ended up playing college hockey anyway. So I'm pleased to say we didn't hold them back. But it was a choice. And at some point you want your head to lose to your heart. If all your pitching is things that appeal to their brain, you'll get people who say, okay, I do this many hours for this much money.
Yes.
Okay, good enough. But I didn't want that. I wanted the Navy SEALs, frankly. I wanted the All Blacks. And I really admire the All Blacks and that great pregame ritual, of course.
Yes.
Speaks volumes. But I wanted those guys. And what I say about interviewing, it's, slow down the interview process, hire slower, fire faster when you need to, hopefully not very often. People say, oh, well, it takes more money and more time to do that kind of hiring. Yes, it does. What does it cost to fire somebody these days? It takes a year, it takes a war chest of at least a year's salary. It takes legal representation, maybe a black guy in public. Very embarrassing. Slow down the interview process. And people say, well, I can't, you can't get them all this way. Right. I don't want them all. I want the All Blacks. I want the Navy SEALs. And what's incredible is we found the Navy SEALs on the 0, 22, and 3 team. They were already there. We just had to pull them out.
I like that. The thing that struck me is that surely some of your players are being recruited by other schools.
Daily, once we got
good. And they stayed. They stayed for what they had built.
Not one player took the bait, and private schools especially can offer a lot. We're a public high school in Ann Arbor. So they had bigger budgets. They got fancier stuff. They go by, chartered bus wherever they go, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we couldn't offer any of that. We could offer a unique experience and a bond like no other. And if that appeals to you, then please stay. Now, keep in mind, again, not even the best players in the school all joined us. I think most of them did, but not all of them. So we were not for everybody. And do I kick myself for not getting all the hot shots? No. I'm grateful that we got the hot shots who want to be part of a special team.
Yes.
Right? And I would not want them if they did not want that, no matter how good they were. So people say you can't get them all. Right. You don't want them all. You want the guys who are driven and who get the team concept first. And Bo Schembechler, the old Michigan football coach, said it a million times, no man, no woman is more important than the team. If you lose that, you're in trouble.
Yeah, that is true. So you've got all these players, they've invested in this. Let's switch gears a little bit, right? Assume we have listeners here who are going in to manage a team. The Monday, they're going to get in there, they're taking over a new team. What do they need to do? What are the principles they need to do to create this, I would call it a self-containing team? Because while you led them, they led themselves, right? So how do you do that? What are the principles you apply when you get in there on a Monday morning?
Great question. Let's keep it real, right? So here we go. That's all hypothetical. Now let's, Monday morning, you're in. What do? First thing you do is you get help. When I see new leaders, and I don't care if you're 25 or 55,
yes,
but new leaders take the helm and they immediately think they've got to have all the answers, be all knowing, all powerful, never take suggestions, never show any weakness. That guy is in trouble. He's going down. And nobody's going to save him because he's got no friends left. There are no safety nets. So get help. My joke in the team was my goal was to be the dumbest guy in the coach's room, and I greatly exceeded my expectations, Michael.
Yes.
So I'm by far the dumbest guy. Weak leaders hire weak leaders, and strong leaders hire strong leaders. I wanted strong leaders, and I got them. We had by far I was not the best coach in the state by a long shot.
Yes.
But I definitely had the best assistant coaching staff in the state, and it wasn't close. When everyone else had 2 or 3, I had 6 or 7 on a given year. So, and they're all volunteers. The players sucked them in. That's what happened. So get help is one thing. Second of all, get to know your people. And this is vital. When my class at Michigan is called Leading by Coaching, and that's one of the reasons the TED Talk in that class produced this book, basically. And I asked them, okay, get in small groups, and let's do a little survey in your small groups, 150 students. And I said, okay, what qualities do you have to have in a leader? What qualities are negotiable? And what qualities are deal breakers? The deal breakers were not that surprising. Trust, respect. If you're disrespectful to your people, especially these days, if they can't trust you, if you lie to them, you're out. All right. In the middle was the negotiable stuff, and it's usually the personality stuff.
Yeah.
In this case, be true to your personality. And I'm obviously a hyper ADD guy, fast talker and so on. Al Clark, my mentor at Culver, who set the national record for the most wins after starting the program with an outdoor rink and guys who never skated before in Indiana. He's produced 25 NHL draft picks, incredibly. He walks into the room before a big game, and his big speech, I swear to God, he comes in and says, well, this would be a good one to win. That's it, really? That's what you got? Well, he won 1,017 games, so I guess it worked pretty well. So be yourself. That's all negotiable. You don't have to be a big speaker into that stuff. But the biggest thing, non-negotiable, they all said, and I would not have guessed this myself, you have to know me. You have to get to know your people. And my trainer, Rod Sorge, legendary trainer on our team, he had a great line to me, and you've heard it before probably. Before they care how much they better know how much you care. So get to know their names, get to know them personally, and they'll tell you what motivates you and what doesn't. Well, hell, that's like cheating, right? You told me where the buttons are, and don't yell at you. Okay, I won't. Here's what I need, X, Y, and Z. So get the help there. Focus on next step. Focus on behaviors, not results. And again, like I said about victories and values earlier, it applies to the corporate world. If you are a for-profit only company, if you're all about the profit and that's all, well, when the profits dry up due to COVID or the economy or laws get changed and all kinds of things that can happen that you don't control, all right, then what do you have left? If you're a win-at-all-cost program and you lose, you have nothing.
Yes.
When you have values first and you're in a losing streak, those values save you. That's your rope out. All right, grab that rope. Your values will get you through it. And when you're winning, we had a 14-game winning streak our third year versus a 10-game losing streak our first year. When you're winning, those values keep your head on straight. Your stock price is zooming. The salaries are great. Sales are great. That's great. Keep your head on straight. And you do that by focusing on values more than victories, by principles more than profits. So if there's a lot to think about on your first Monday, but that'll get you off to a pretty good start right there.
Yeah, I remember watching the show Ted Lasso, and you mentioned it in the book several times and so on. I like the show because it's very positive, but I remember that the guy was really true to himself. He did not be what was expected of him. And everyone laughed at him because he's this kooky guy, but he wore that with pride. This is who he is.
And I love that. You kind of expect it when he started getting some grief for his Wichita, backward country ways. Here he is in London. He was aware of that. He was aware of the fact that the press is mocking him, that his players are giggling about what he says, that the owner has largely disregard for him. And he had enough self-confidence to keep going anyway. Know who you are. I've never seen Al Clark try to be anything other than what he is.
Yeah.
Nor do I, obviously, but that's essential. And one of the key principles in the book that you already know is the ability to define yourself individually and as a team. I've never seen any truly great achiever or any great achieving team or company or division that did not have that ability. We are not our stock price. We are not just our sales figures. We are bigger than that. And that confidence you have to make tough decisions, to make decisions that the public goes, what are you doing? All right. They don't have to agree. And one of our lines we said was, everything we need to win is in this room and nothing we need to win is outside this room. The people who I care about are here. And I don't care about anybody outside this room. All right. Not the stockholders, I guess you got to care about the board, and I know about stockholders. The best companies don't pander to that, I think. The best companies know what the right thing to do is, so they do it.
When you're speaking, it's almost as if you have to see your team members or whatever, your players for who they really are and accept them for who they really are, and then add in the building blocks of what they want to be. It's almost interesting because you can't push someone to be something they don't want to be.
Completely right. I was in '98 covering the Nagano Olympics for the Detroit News, and I was still there. And Tara Lipinski, of course, won the gold medal that year. And I'm watching her practice in Detroit. And her mom from Texas, not a skater, sees her out there, and she's, working really hard, and she's wiping out, and that ice hurts. And she's a tiny girl without any pads on. She's like 16 at the time, not a hockey player. And I said to her mom at some point, I got to know her fairly well at that point. I said, the critics say that you've pushed her to do all this and so on. What do you say to that? And she points to the ice, and her daughter falling again. She's a world-class skater, obviously, but you fall doing that stuff. And she goes, no parent could ever make their daughter work that hard. And I thought, she's right. You can't make her want this. Yes. You can't make her do all, you might make her, get her to a certain level, but you can't make her do all that. And so in a real sense, you're really not motivating them to work harder and so on. You're motivating them to want to work harder.
Yes, that's a very big difference.
There is a big difference, and you get it. It sounds like the same thing, but it's not. I can't make you do anything. I mean, our summer workouts, we did all July, August, September, October, before the season even started. By state law, I can't make you be there. I can't take attendance. I can't count it against you in the off season. So what can you do? We had the world's hardest, not the world's, the state's hardest high school workouts. Half an hour in the weight room, half an hour on the track, full blast the whole time. All of us threw up at some point or other, including me and assistant coach Michael Appridge, who was great. All these guys threw up at some point or other. Not one player quit, and I couldn't even make you be there. So at that point, again, this is the worst team in America, but that was their desire. Once they see that somebody cares about them, somebody believes in them, someone's willing to push them, and that is what you're really hoping. They start pushing themselves.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because obviously I do a lot of work with MBA schools and MBA students and so on.
Right.
But the thing I find always very amusing about leadership training is it's very technical. It's about valuations and supply chains. But the role of a leader, a great leader wants people to work for him or her. And they don't teach you that in business school, right? I always tell people a leader knows how to outsource his work. And he outsources, or she or he outsources it in a way, not that they force people to do it, but they have people climbing over to say, let me work for you. I want to work for you. I want to be on your team. I want to do this with you. But it's something that's never taught. And I don't think you can teach this, actually.
You can't teach. There are parts of you can't teach. There's no question about that. But when you get this thing going, the first thing people do nowadays is the biggest mistake. We're back to your Monday morning example.
Yeah.
The first thing they tell you to do is this generation is not going to work that hard, or workers generally right now at the Great Resignation and quiet quitting and everything else. So you got to lower the bar, and you got to give them, casual Fridays and Taco Tuesdays and all this stuff. And the good news is if you sell casual Fridays and Taco Tuesdays, you'll get people who love casual Fridays and Taco Tuesdays. You won't get hard workers because you're not selling it. So sell the hard work. And what we said, what do the Navy SEALs say? They don't apologize for it being hard. They don't deny it. They brag about it. And, can you cut it? And my first line was, we will be the hardest working high school hockey team in the state of Michigan. And that's what I'm selling. And who's interested in that? If you're interested in that, let's keep talking. So that's the deal now with the B schools and so on. Got to lower the bar, more incentives, more this and that. If all you're selling is a salary, somebody's going to offer more sooner or later, and they're going to leave. And what I want is your All Blacks friend who is so passionate about being on the All Blacks, he can't imagine going anywhere else, even for $1 million pay cut. That's a hell of a thing. If you're selling salary, you've already lost him. I want to sell togetherness, a sense of belonging. This is the great advantage, by the way, of this generation, in my opinion. They get a bad rap, but power, prestige, and pay do not motivate them the way they motivated our generation. We're both old enough to be in that category, I think. A sense of belonging, a sense of purpose. They expect more from work than we did, frankly. They want those things, a sense of mission. And if you give them those things, you'll get the right people. So don't lower the bar on that one. And how do you get it? That's you sell it from the start. And whatever you expect to get is probably what you're going to get. So that's the sad fact there.
One of the principles that you talk about a lot, but I want to pull it out because it's very important. Typically, when new leaders go in, they try to get a quick win. You've heard that phrase, a quick win to raise morale. But oftentimes you can't get a quick win because your team is not at that level to get a win. But there's something that you do consistently, and you mention it a lot, whereby you give them something else to be proud about. You set a high standard. So even if they don't get a quick win, the fact that they hit that standard, it has the same effect on this chemistry and brain psychology, whereby they think, okay, we haven't won a game, but we are winners because we've set a bar and we're sticking to it. I like the example whereby you said that you made them arrive on time. I like that because it's such an important thing to be there. Even if you can't play at your best, it's a very clever technique. How did you develop that technique?
That one's simple, but as far as the get a quick win and so on, I see the need for that. The big question is, how do you define win?
Yes.
Again, I'm back to external versus internal. I don't control the world. I don't control our opponents, and they don't either. All right, and we play good teams, and we can lose to anybody at any time. And by the way, the second you quit thinking that, that's when you lose. So you always need that mentality. We defined our own victories, again, with our own behaviors. I keep on beating that drum, but for a reason, because it applies to almost everything we're talking about. So our victories, our wins, we're learning how to count and stretch correctly. It took us about 2 weeks.
Wow.
It was a slow process. And then we started setting records in the track. I kept track of everything, team records for the relays and whatnot. And by the end of July, they started bragging to their buddies in the school on the football and the basketball and the baseball teams, saying our workouts are harder than yours. And these guys now want to come out to try our workouts because they don't believe it, and they got crushed. They finished, but they didn't win. So now you got it going on. And that's what you really want, is them to be internally driven. So we define, again, our own victories. So we needed quick wins, but the wins that we defined, because we weren't even going to play a game for 4 months, and I couldn't guarantee that at all. So a quick win, but internal, not external. That's my first bit of advice there.
And it's interesting, because what you've done is you've made winning a byproduct of having values. It's not the goal, it's the byproduct. No one is focused on that. It's about, how do we be the best we can be? How do we set these standards? How do we meet these standards? How do we protect each team member? How do we follow the game plan? How do we help each other? But it's never about winning. In this entire discussion, we never talked about what is the game plan to win.
And the wins got us the attention, but exactly right. And it's not unconscious. We were very consciously aware that wins were the byproduct of what we're doing, but it's not the result. It's not what we're all about. And I can even say, out of 100 some games I coached, our 3 best games were all losses.
Yes.
All 1-goal losses, and heartbreaking. Games that we crushed the opponent, but pucks bounce, and goalies do funny things on both sides. So you can't count on that stuff. And what's good about that, therefore, is the wins feel, if all you're about is wins, then okay, it doesn't taste as good. I'm sorry. if we know that the whole team was part of this, all 4 lines and the backup players and all the rest, and we all contributed in various ways, then it's a much better feeling, I think, in the locker room than you get from a win-at-all-cost program. So, and I was afraid my 3rd year, we were 17-4-5. We went from 0-22-3 to 17-4-5. We played, I think, 17 ranked teams that year and beat almost all of them. It was a brutal schedule I put together. We were supposed to have a real run at the state title. We got knocked out in the 2nd round to a team that a ranked team, but we were better than them. We outshot them 2-1. We still lost. It's heartbreaking. I mean, they're crying, I'm crying, the whole bit. That's the price you pay for carrying. I was afraid at the senior banquet that would overshadow their experience. And I should have known better. These guys were smarter than that. They were wiser than that. And our program was bigger than that. And they didn't talk about that loss. They didn't talk about the winning streak either. They didn't talk about beating our rivals. They talked about how great it was to walk into the locker room and know that everyone's got your back and how much they're going to miss the experience and how much they love each other. Yeah, that's what you want. And when you got that going, man, that's a team that comes back the next year. That's a team that keeps going. That is sustainable. And most other things really aren't.
It's interesting you brought up the word sustainable, because that's what I was thinking about, is that you need to create a team that self-perpetuates. Otherwise, as soon as these players leave and new players come in, because there's no value system, they bring their own value system. But what you want is a value system that is there, people aspire to belong to it, and people protect it. That's, I'm a big sports guy, speak to these coaches all the time. And I remember this one English coach, tier 4, actually, so not even a famous team.
Oh, yeah.
And I was asking him, what's the game plan? He said, we're going to lose the next 10 games, but that's okay, because I want the players to want to win. And that was his game plan. He didn't care about anything. They were losing sponsors and so on, but he said, this needs to be sustainable. I can get victories in the first 10 games, but I have to change my players. And that's not sustainable. You need a system where you don't have to keep on changing your players, because we don't have the money to buy players. I have to have a strategy that can win for me. And it's not about, open check. And I thought that's very wise, because a lot of coaches don't think that way. What they do is they say, let's get a sponsor, but a sponsor with a big checkbook papers over the fact that you don't have the right values in your team.
And you can't, it's a drug. Those
checks is a drug.
Are drugs. And they'll give you a shot in the arm, and they'll give you a pretty quick high. No question about that, but it's not sustainable. It's not happiness. It's a drug. And very big difference there, of course. So I believe that strongly. And we did have some stars in our team, no question about them. But our line about being on time, which you referenced earlier, the bus waits for no man. And we left one of our leading scorers in the parking lot. We left the starting goalie in the parking lot. Yeah. You hope it happens early in the season when the stakes are a little lower and they learn the lesson they retain for the rest of the year. But there's a great message in that, and that is that nobody's bigger than this. And that then becomes sustainable. What happened our 2nd year? Our 1st year, they're all new to me, and I'm new to them. So everyone's starting fresh. The 2nd year, and this should be true of your corporation from now on, your division, guess what? Only the new guys are new. Only the freshmen are new. Everyone else knows exactly what we're doing and how we do it. So that's when the culture starts, like you said, perpetuating itself.
Yes.
A great phrase. And I go back to John Cooper. John Cooper was the coach of Lansing Catholic Central, the capital city in Michigan.
Yes.
When I was coaching at Huron, and he's now the head coach of the Tampa Bay Lightning, who have won 2 straight Stanley Cups recently, almost won a 3rd this spring. So I guess our career paths have somehow diverged, Michael, because I'm free this year. So he's apparently quite busy, but he had a great line, which I used in the book. Bad teams, nobody leads. Good teams, coaches lead. Great teams, everybody leads. And that is sustainable. That will perpetuate itself, as you say, after you're gone, after the stars are gone and so on and so forth. It's true in the workplace as well. You want everybody leading, and the title of the book is "Let Them Lead" for a reason. So, and if it's you versus them, you lose. Because what do you have? 5 guys in your division, 20, 100, whatever it is. There's more of them than you. So if it's you versus them, you lose. It's got to be all of us pulling together.
So we spoke about people wanting to do this, right? So you inherited this team, and you kept everyone. That means you allowed them to want to do this. It means you cut nobody. So does it mean that you can always get people like that, or at some point you have to cut your losses and say this person doesn't want to do it and they need to be replaced? How do you make that call?
The answer is both. I think there are always good people out there who want to do this, and you
Yes.
might be surprised where you find them. They might not appear that way when you first see them. So it's your job is to put the carrots out there and see who jumps,
Yes.
basically, who wants this. And you'll be surprised who actually does want it and how far they're willing to go. That's one thing. Second of all, though, like I said, it's not for everybody. And if somebody, is not getting it, behavior stuff we're talking about, not results, not your sales figures, but behaviors. First time you have a talk, second time, all right, same thing. Third time, they got to go. And disloyalty and dishonesty are the two best reasons to fire somebody, in my opinion. I don't want to do that. I would hate doing that. But I was willing to do that. That's the key. And they knew that I was willing to do that. And I say in the book, Steve Beltran, probably our starting goalie, along with Alan Sheldon, two very good goalies. He had a bit of an attitude the first month of our workouts in July, and it kept kind of building a little bit. And it wasn't anything that egregious, in fairness to Steve, but I was just tired of it. And I knew what I was seeing every day. And every day he's pushing. Every day he's like, are you trying to make me pull you? Or are you helping us pull the train yourself? And I finally decided, that's what he's doing. He's making it harder for us. So I said to him, you know what? You really don't want to be here. And you've shown it to me every time you've been here. You need to go home. This is a privilege you don't deserve. You need to go home and you're off the team. And then, his face turned white and ashen and all that. And then I got a call Sunday night from him, basically begging to be back on the team. And we talked it through. Sure, great, no problem. I never had a problem with Steve again. And that was in July. And he ended up being a great goalie, but he really became a great leader. I consider him now a great friend. I went to his wedding a few years ago. And now he's a father of 2 kids, a lovely wife, and he's a teacher at Trenton, our arch rival. Wow. And they're lucky to have him. I'll say that. But look, it's not for everybody. I get that. And if you don't lower your bar, and if they're truly not willing to go over it, they have to go. And once in a while, look, I don't like seeing 40% turnover in the companies I work with, and you don't either. But I don't like seeing 2% either. 2% tells me you've made it too easy. It's too comfortable here. 10% or so, that's okay. That means, the right people are sticking around and maybe the wrong people aren't. That's okay. So keep your eye on that. Now, those numbers vary a great deal from industry to industry. I know that. Food service, for example, if you guess right in 60%, you're a genius. So it depends on the field, obviously, but it's okay if you have to let someone go, you have to tell everyone else there why you did it, what the red line was, so they know that it applies to them and it applies to everybody. And if you stay clear of the red line, you'll be okay. They don't need to live in fear, but don't be stupid either. And that was our approach.
And the interesting thing here is that the book is about leadership, and it's a very good book about leadership. But there's also an element here of the young generation and the perceptions we have about the young generation. I remember I go to this restaurant all the time, and I always talk to people there. And I once met a lady with a daughter, and I was talking to her daughter. Her daughter is actually a model, fairly famous. You probably have seen her around. And at the end of the day, I remember when they were leaving, I actually thanked the mom, and I said, after meeting your daughter, I think I've actually been convinced to have children, because this lady is so amazing. And the mother was surprised and said, but she's such a handful. She's always on her phone and so on. I said, she's just different and she needs leadership. And that's the thing about, whenever people say, America is going down, it's the most divisive it's ever been. There's so much chaos and there's so much drama. And I always say, but look, I look at kids today and I think we're in good hands. They just need some leadership. But I actually think kids today are pretty good. And I don't see anything negative there. And what I think happens a lot of times is we forget we were kids once.
Yeah, you don't want to see me in high school. Not that on paper I was doing fine. Schoolwork, I was a third string high school hockey player, class vice president, that kind of stuff. But man, all kinds of other issues and blah, 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 like everyone else has got. Great line from Al Clark, my mentor, when I was complaining about somebody on my team. We talked once a week. So again, new leaders, find your mentors and stick close. And I did with Al. But I was complaining about this or that. And he said, John, If all the kids were perfect, our work would not count for much.
Yes.
If you're a leader, by the way, your people's problems aren't some distraction from your actual job and the sales figures and so on. They are your job. That's the main part of your job, is solving that stuff. It's not your job to sell whatever you're selling. It's their job to sell it. All right. It's your job to help them do their jobs. So all the problems they bring you, by the way, that's the stuff you're supposed to be handling. Great line from Colin Powell, who said, the day that your people quit bringing you their problems is the day that you quit being their leader. And that still applies. So today's generation, they're no more screwed up than we were. Yes. A great quote, by the way, I got along the way saying, today's generation is disrespectful. They're lazy. They're entitled. They don't even stand up when you come into the room. They're hopeless. The guy who said that was Socrates more than 2,000 years ago. Yeah. So I guess this is not a new problem. So
yes, it's true, because whenever I deal with clients, the most common thing I do with them is I ask them to open their diary. And of all the meetings they had in the week, tell me how many meetings you enjoyed. And a lot of them they'll be so proud and they'll say, I enjoyed 80% of the meetings. And I tell them, then you shouldn't be in those meetings. Your job as the leader is to go where there's trouble that only you can fix. And if you are in a meeting that you enjoy and you don't need to be there, then who's actually fixing the problem that needs to be fixed?
Why are you there? Right?
Yeah, exactly. I always tell people, your job is not to go where things are going well. If you are the leader, your job is to go where nobody can fix it. And it may not be pleasant, but you can't take it personally. You don't have fun as a leader. You take pride in being a leader.
And by the way, if you want to be popular, by the way, don't become a leader.
Yes.
Because on a given day, you're not going to be. Now, overall, perhaps you are. I don't think you need to be unpopular. But if you you need external reinforcement every day from all your people, get out now, because you're not going to get it. It'll be memorable. It's like having kids for all the thanks you're going to get. You were misinformed. Okay. It's not how the thing works. But that's I like that. Great line from Ron Alvesteffer, CEO of Service Express out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, but they're international now, including the UK, across the country. Great line. It says, I want leaders who walk into trouble. In other words, wherever the problem is, you don't run away from it. You find out what the problem is, and your job is to go in first. It's the 9/11 firefighters. It's your job to go into the building, not out of the building. And we're asking a lot. I get it. We're asking a lot. And I realize that one is life and death and one is sales figures. Yes. Nonetheless, I know the difference. But that's the mentality that I want. We don't run from trouble. We run to trouble. And that's what Ron underscores. And his company is amazing.
I remember I interviewed John Mack once. Well, not interview, I was speaking to him. He used to be the CEO of Morgan Stanley.
Oh, yeah.
And he told me this great story. I asked him, how do you inculcate values? Because he came in after a guy called Philip Purcell. I didn't know the guy personally, but he caused a lot of trouble with the culture. And I said, now, how did you change the culture? And he said, it's little things. And he told me the story once whereby he was working quite closely with the investment bankers, and they were working on a major deal that the company needed. And this delivery guy came to deliver some pizzas. And the junior bankers didn't value that guy's time, so they just made him wait. When John Mack was coming in, he saw the pizza guy. Then he asked the pizza guy, who are you waiting for? This is the CEO of Morgan Stanley. He goes up to the deal room and he tells the junior banker to go downstairs and apologize. And you can never, ever do that again. And that for me is a brilliant example. It's not about what you say. It's not about the big things. It's about all these million little things you do that count, because people don't, my experience, and I don't know if you've seen this well, people don't listen to what you say. They do what they see you do.
That's undeniably true. And look, if you're a leader, you're always on stage, whether you think you're or not. It's not just your big speeches and your big meetings. Yeah. It's your trip to the water cooler and coaching your kid's soccer game. It all counts. And the pizza guy is vital, by the way. I'm a huge believer in the no small people idea, that they all matter. And when you celebrate the successes of those in the quote unquote lower ranking of the bunch, the whole team gets energized. You see it in a college basketball game when the guy comes off the bench to play. The starters, the future NBA players, they're all standing up and cheering the guy on. It pumps them up to see this. And I go back to Bo Schembechler, the former football coach at Michigan. He and I wrote a book together called Bo's Lasting Lessons, which Warren Buffett, God bless him, actually endorsed. And Bo said, look, it's not Mary Passing, his secretary. It's not her job just to open envelopes and answer emails, answer the phone. It's her job to win Big Ten titles. And she does that by being the best secretary in the Big Ten. And that's pretty cool. So
I
when
love
you,
that.
oh, it's
That's a
awesome.
great way of
and he
viewing
believed it.
things. Yeah. It's interesting. People will live up to the expectation that you set for them.
That's exactly it. And including the pizza guy, by the way. And I know this from being a single guy for a long time. I got married at 49, very late. So I was dating for what, 3 decades?
Yeah.
Watch how your date treats the wait staff, by the way.
Yes.
That's you in about a month.
Yeah, that's true. I remember the first time when I became senior partner at a consulting firm, I was assigned an executive assistant who was older than me. I mean, she could be like my mom. And I remember for the first week, I would avoid her because I don't know how to tell someone my mom's age what to do. It just seems wrong.
Right.
I don't know. How could you tell this lady to go pick up my food and do that? I don't want to tell her what to do. So she hunted me down and said, look, I've been working here for a week. You haven't told me to do anything. And I said, look, you've been here for 30 years. I think you know what you need to do. I don't need to tell you anything. You just make sure that I get my job done and you can do whatever you want because you're doing a good job anyway. And that lady was so loyal to me. She did more than I could ever ask for. She'd go find special food for me, pick up documents and drop it up. And I never had to ask her to do anything.
If you want to know somebody, by the way, 2 rules on that one.
Yeah.
The bacon law of the locker room. Don't ask you can fool the press, you can fool the fans pretty easily. The guys in the locker room, you can't fool, no chance. Yes. So ask the teammates. Second of all, in the corporate world, talk to the administrative assistants, talk to the interns. They know exactly who you are.
Yeah.
And I always know too, if I'm talking to a CEO, if that guy has had the same, or woman, the same administrative assistant for many years, and that person is loyal to them, I know just about all I need to know at that point. And if they are going through them every year or two, that's not a good sign. The money wears off pretty fast. So I love that. I love that lesson you just given me, by the way. And the pizza guy matters.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
I've been the pizza guy.
Yeah, even where I live, I mean, we have a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Helpers and landscapers who are usually of Latin American heritage, right? Hispanic. But I actually make a point of greeting all of them. And it's not because I'm some nice guy, because I know that they will notice and they'll care more. And they do notice and they do care more. Oftentimes I need something done. I say, hey, will you do this for me? I know they charge other people to do it, but they'll say, yeah, no problem. I'll get it done for you. The other day, I wanted them to remove something that had broken in my house. And they said, no problem, we'll do it for you. And it just came at their own time, fixed it, and went away. It's those little things, right? You can always see people based on how they act when they think nobody's watching.
My mom's line, it's in the book, and I'm sure it was before her, but your character is what you do when you think no one's watching. And if you can't pass that test, don't be a leader, because they're watching you all the time. So that one works very well, of course. And I love, absolutely right. It's amazing what people are going to do if they feel valued, if they feel like they're important, they count. My dad was a pediatrician at the University of Michigan for many years, and he knew the custodian's name, and the custodian knew his name. He didn't call him doctor, called him George. And I'm a 10-year-old kid, and I'm watching this. And trust me, that's a few years ago now, Michael. That one, I can draw that scene for you right now. It made a huge impression on me. And there's a great point about that. The quick story I can't resist. It boils down to this. I'll make it shorter. The waiter walking by the way, you're the fancy guy speaking tonight, and you got a big meal and you need to eat first and so on. And you say, I need my butter now. And the guy says, no problem, I'm about to deliver these meals. No, I need it now. I'm the big shot. I'm speaking now and so on. The guy says, that's very impressive. Do you know who I am? And he goes, no. I go, I'm the guy in charge of the butter. So
I like that. That's a great one.
The pizza guy, he's in charge of the pizza. Do you want pizza? Yeah, because you know what? He doesn't want anything you have except for money. All right, but you want pizza. So apparently right now he's more important than you are. Treat him accordingly.
Yes, it's interesting because I've speak to all kinds of leaders, people who run the military command, corporate CEOs, coaches like yourself, and so on, successful coaches. But the principles of leadership are the same. There's no difference. What we are discussing now would be completely relevant to the guy running Walmart.
I would hope so. And I wrote the book with that in mind, that you don't need to know anything about sports or hockey. People are people. And the problems are pretty much the same. And I agree with you about leadership. There's not much new under the sun. And a great leader 2,000 years ago looks about like a great leader today. You read Marcus Aurelius, you go, yeah, that's what it looks like. He's the guy. And it's about the same. So in that sense, of course, things have not changed very much, and leadership is leadership. Tolstoy, the famous author, of course, had a great line about families. He said, all unhappy families are unhappy in their own way. All happy families are about the same.
I like that. Yes, I've read that before.
Yeah, and I'm probably, bastardizing that, no doubt, but that's the gist of it. I think he's right. When things aren't going right, I can find you 100 reasons. When things are going right, I can tell you what you have. You have strong leadership. You have a strong sense of purpose, a strong sense of mission. Everybody here feels important. Everybody here feels valued. And you've got very high expectations. I can tell you right now, having never seen your company or whatever else, that's what it's going to look like.
Yeah, one of the common discussions I have with clients is they often come to me and say, Michael, what is the latest thinking on leadership? And I'm asking them, why do you need the latest thinking on leadership? And they'll say, well, I've actually read all the books on leadership. And I said, okay, that's good, but are you doing it? There's a big difference between knowing something and doing something.
And there you go. And it's in my book also, and I say this in my speeches. I said, look, I freely admit that everything in this book is simple. Everything in here is simple. Nothing is complicated. And none of it is easy. And don't confuse simple with easy. If it was easy, then everybody would be doing what I'm doing and we'd be even with everyone else, but we weren't. We crushed them. How did we crush them? Because we did the simple things and they didn't. That's how we did it.
Yeah, it's not enough to know. You have to do it. And a lot of people know things, but they just don't do it. And sometimes I work with people and I'll say, why haven't you not done it? And I'll say, well, I forgot to, let's discuss something new. And I said, no, let's go back and get this done and figure out how to do it and make it a routine so you never forget how to do it. It's all about routines. When you were talking about the fact that you made sure they arrived on time, it's a routine. It's like going to church, right? You go to church on a Sunday, it's a routine. No matter what happens in your life, you have to go to church so your life can never spiral out of control because you have a routine that builds it in. And I think that's very important. Right. You need routines because it stops you from spiraling out of control.
And teams need it more.
Yeah.
And what's great about team with routines is like, look, all you have to do, our workouts start at 3:00. All you have to do is to get to the locker room on time, get into your workout clothes, and the train takes you. In other words, once you're out of the workout, everyone's going to run, everyone's going to do this. I mean, you don't have to think about it very much because the train will take you along. And there's great comfort in that, I think. So we had a very strict no late policy, and they just weren't. Yeah. I can count on, I think, 3 or 4 times. So what is that? 20 players times 1,000, 100 games, about 2,000 opportunities for them to be late. I think 3 players were late for a game, ever. And by late for a game, that means 5:00 for a 7:00 game.
Yes.
That's how we pin that one. But yeah, once that routine's in place, then it kind of takes care of itself. And you don't have to think about everything all the time. You think you're doing a great thing by making exceptions here, there, and everywhere else. Once you start doing that, then everyone wants an exception. And your whole job is to be the judge of who's late for a good enough reason.
Yes.
You want to get out of all that, period, and just we're going to be on time. Make it a routine, like you say, and make it simple. So those simple routines are very comforting, and people usually like them.
Well, John, I thoroughly enjoyed speaking to you. You've actually left one thought with me that I hadn't thought about before, but it does make a lot of sense, whereby you spoke about teachers as being coaches of a team, and the class is the team. And then you said something very interesting, which I had not thought about, is that a teacher doesn't get to pick their team.
People don't think about that much, but my mom is beat that one into my head, a former grade school teacher. She gets tired of seeing the CEOs come in, clean house, and do it that way. And I can see making some changes and see who's really in, who's not. And if you've got somebody, your right-hand man or right-hand woman from the previous place, I can see value in that. But clean the whole shelf, I hate it. It's weakness to me. Yeah. And so before you start complaining about the people you inherited, find out. And if this team right here, by the way, you want a recruiting problem, I was the worst player in school history, taking over the worst team in America, and they voted against me 4-2 in the interviews. And one of them ended up flipping later on. So it's 3-3, and I won on a tie. And the players and the parents were very upset that I was named the head coach. Recruit to that. And we did. And we did by, how do you make it special? You make it hard. And you find out who really wants it. At my class at the University of Michigan, I spent the first about 15, 20 minutes telling them all the very specific reasons why they should not take my class. It's too much reading for 200 level. My quizzes are brutal. The midterms are worse.
Yeah.
And the final exam's gonna make your ears bleed. The average grade in this class is about a B+, which is low by university standards. And no hats, no laptops, no cell phones. The door's right over there. And I get it. This is not for everybody. We had the longest wait list in the history of the school. So do not underestimate today's people. They actually, the right ones, they want that. 150 in the class and 170 in the wait list. And I was begging them not to take my class. So that's how you do it. You raise the bar, not lower it, and stick to your principles. Principles before profits.
And the other thing you said, which is very wise, is this idea of having this large checkbook, which basically makes you addicted to money. And in fact, the only reason you have these winners is because you're paying them so much money. As soon as you stop paying them, they're going to leave. So there's no sustainability. There's no value system. There's no culture. It's basically a bought trophy.
It is. And when that happens, watch how fast it falls apart.
Yes.
The Florida Marlins did this twice when they won World Series, and they fell apart the next year and they sold off the team and so on. That's not a culture. That's not a team. What impresses me were the Detroit Red Wings in the 90s and the zeros, 23 or 4 straight years in the playoffs and 4 Stanley Cups during that run. That is sustainable. That's an incredible run. And you don't get that merely by outbidding everybody. People like your friend at the All Blacks, perfect. All those guys could have gone somewhere else for more money, and they all wanted to be a Red Wing. That's what you really want.
It's also disrespectful to the fans, right? You're deliberately building a business model that's going to hurt them at some point.
They're going to pay more for, and ask the Marlins fans in Florida. Now I'm going to pay more for them. The second they win the thing, they're going to disband the whole thing anyway. So they weren't very serious about it in the first place. So obviously the money thing is an issue, but friends of mine who run big law firms, they say, yeah, there's some hotshot lawyers out there and you don't want them because they're going to kill the morale for everybody else because they're going to have too many demands. Now, if they're hotshot and they want to play by the team rules, that's your A+. Take that guy all day long, take that woman all day long. But if the hotshots are not always worth it, I'll say that. And man, there are few feelings, as you know, better than taking your team of leftovers, players they didn't want, and beating the hotshots with those guys. That is delicious. And
that is the best feeling. I think it was Sir Alex Ferguson who said, they interviewed him, and he said, the number one rule is no jerks. You can't have jerks in the locker room because they suck the energy out of everyone.
My rule in that was I could take about 3 projects, I call them, 3 guys with attitudes that needed work. And if I've got 20 good guys all working hard, the 3 will get absorbed. The 20 guys will take them on and they'll adjust. If you get 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all right, now you got a cancer, they got a beachhead on your beach, and they're going to start taking over the culture of the program. Now you're in trouble. So that can't work. A few will probably get absorbed. More than that, and you got a critical mass.
Well, John, I must say the highlight of my week is probably going to be speaking to you. You really,
you need better weeks.
I love speaking to you because, people always say, why do you do podcasts? It's not work. I get to speak to amazing people every day.
That's why I do it. And by the way, Michael, I got bad news. I'm inviting you on mine. So heads up.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'd love to be there. Thank you so much. John, amazing. We should definitely keep in touch, speak more. But I loved the way you view the world. I wish more teachers had your mindset.
Very kind. And many do, of course. And but we got to make it a world where those are rewarded, basically, says me. But the book, before I forget, is Let Them Lead. Unexpected Lessons in Leadership from America's Worst High School Hockey Team. And the website is letthemleadbybacon.com. And that has the podcast. Forget business here for a second here. Yeah. It's been a delight, a ton of fun. And what I love about these is what we need is a couple beers to talk about the All Blacks and share our experience.
Yes, why not? Look, I love the book. It's going to be one of our recommended books for the year. Everyone needs a feel-good story, I think. The news is always negative. No one talks about these things that are, it seems small, right? High school team. They're not a professional team. But what can you learn from a high school team? But here's the thing. Leadership flourishes where it's needed.
I like that a lot. And these guys were great, obviously. We have a barbecue every summer in my backyard, 18 years after I quit coaching, and they all come back for it. And that makes my day. But I love that approach. And right now, that in my lifetime, and yours too, I'm sure. I barely remember Vietnam. I was a kid. This is as divisive as we've been. It's a scary time. Yeah. And it's hostile, loud, angry, online, and so on. And I think you might find this be a refreshing break, you have certainly, of
Yes.
positive news and honest news. It's a real story. And we tell it honestly. So it was fun for me to finally put it together and honor these players.
John, have a great day. We'll be in touch and we'll do another show together.
I'd love to, Michael. Thank you very much.
Take care. Ciao.